Okay, so Police Academies in the US, okay, the name's Mark Conley, folks. Just as a background, PhD in engineering, worked with GE, mostly on aircraft engines, stealth technology, worked for NASA for a time, was professor at aeronautics at University of Cincinnati, Ohio, and also since that time worked in law enforcement systems, training systems for law enforcement, okay? And what we're going to cover, folks, a little bit of background to law enforcement academies. Before we go in there, I'd like to discuss how they work, opportunities for IT to improve learning outcomes. Let's talk about how we use IT here. Basically, the journey of Northern Virginia, that's where we did the implementation, some of the challenges and lessons learned, really simple. And then if we have time for questions, that's great, okay? Here's what an academy looks like. And this here is Maine Criminal Justice Academy, and it looks like they all don't look like they're out of a Scorsese movie, so but this one does. And again, look at the demographics of most of the cohort of students, mid-20s, mostly male. And again, not forgetting the objective of our academy is to train the recruits in the knowledge necessary for law enforcement career. Okay, so it's really to offer the skills, the tactics, and the knowledge, okay, for law enforcement careers. Some background to academies, okay, so this is why we'd like to, it's about 800 academies in the US, 60,000 recruits, that's quite a lot, okay, and 85% of them graduate. But the takeaway from this is the average age is about 26, okay. Now, standard deviation on that is about 5 on each side. So, you go from mostly early 20s up to 30s is the kind of cohort, mostly skewed, in the high 20s. Recruitment's a challenge. Okay, so the police academies are training people, but we need to get them through the system. So there has been some changes, but again, attrition is important, and 15% is typical attrition rates, about half voluntary, half involuntary. But police departments need recruits, need officers. So they have certainly relaxed some of their requirements. So where that goes with the attrition, remains to be seen. Okay. Okay. The interesting thing, which I thought when I kind of looked at this, is the fact that attrition in the academy is also inversely related to unemployment. Okay, and in fact, external factors have a lot of effect here. If you look at this study for Michigan, very high unemployment, you get very low attrition, okay, because people realize, this is a good career and I have a job. Okay, I can get it can lead to a good career if I graduate the academy. So you can see very low attrition in these times as unemployment in the Great Recession was very high, okay. The other thing what's fascinating is people who are very fit, there's a paper on the people who are very fit who could do 40 push-ups could expect a 98% graduation rate. And that's incredible, okay? That you can predict, you can get somebody to do greater than 40 push-ups, then you're going to get a graduation rate in excess of 98%. And I think it maybe goes to the mentality of that cohort, okay? That is probably why they graduate in such high percentages. The 800 hours is about how many hours they teach. That's 20 weeks. It can go up to about 1,800, okay? But generally about 800, and it depends on the size of the academies. Okay, so small academies, can fewer hours, but generally 800 hours across, whether very small or very large, okay? And the other thing is, what do the academies teach? Is there an opportunity there for IT? Well, it used to be mostly stress related, or 22% was, use of force, defensive tactics. But more recently, that number has really gone down, where, there's a lot more emphasis on soft skills, communication skills, etc. Okay. And you can see that's dropped to 4.4%. So only 4% of academies are strictly stress type training. Most are now a combination of both. Okay. What do they train on? Everything from defensive tactics, community policing, self-improvement. But all of what they train on is typically dictated by the state rules and regulations. Okay. And now the question becomes from an IT part, is equipment available? And if you look at, again, Bureau of Justice statistics data, absolutely. Most academies will have electronic tablets, computers, computer lab, internet, etc. 75, 76%. So generally, academies have the necessary equipment to perform the IT tasks. Okay, so let me just give the takeaways here. Most important one is Gen Z, digital natives, very comfortable with IT. Academies generally are equipment rich. The curriculum is changing. Okay, it'll probably change again with some of the recent changes. Attrition is a big factor. It's reducible depending on circumstances. But requirement and recruitment needs are always going to be important for the academies, and the curriculum is intense. Generally, the comments are it was very intense, but it was very enjoyable. Okay, so what can IT do? Well, one of the things we can look at is improving learning outcomes. Okay, learning outcomes are fine. Okay, but really, what you want to work on is improving results. Okay, so improving the performance of an officer in the field. Okay, and with that comes ancillary benefits that they just have a better learning experience. Okay, and improved operational efficiency within the academy, and that's important. Okay, to get better operational efficiency. So one of the areas we identified was online testing, and we did that with implementing this at the academy in Northern Virginia. Before you go, this is general comments that you can get online from a bunch of academies, not anyone in particular, but paper testing is a joke, was one comment. Need more scenario training. Debt by PowerPoint was a complaint. Okay, one person didn't like online learning, etc. But again, the challenge here now is take a paper test and that's delivered right now using Scantron and convert it to an online testing system. But there's a lot of gotchas. We want to get to here where they're doing online testing, but there is problems with paper testing, which we recognize, but it's got one significant advantage, which I also want to highlight. It's time consuming. Doing a reattempt. If you've ever done a reattempt on a paper testing where you've got to print out the reattempt sheets, etc., you can't monitor their progress in real time, so you don't really know how far along they are. You can't change questions easily, and the students themselves generally have a record of their progress. The big advantage, okay, is the fact that it's permanently recorded. Okay, so so if there is an FOI request down the road, you have a permanent record in a filing cabinet where you can take out and give it and present it to the attorney. So the other challenge is we recognize putting in an online testing system is the law enforcement requirements are unique. Okay, it's not like you can take an off-the-shelf system and plug it into a law enforcement. And part of the reason is because learning objectives are so important. You got to record by block and subject because often you have state requirements to meet minimum standards in different subjects and different blocks. And again, the must-haves are immediate feedback. And here's the big one: it's auditable. Okay, what proof do you have that person answered that question at that time? Okay, you do need to minimize cheating opportunities. That can be done primarily by randomization. It must be robust, because everything in a police department, in a law enforcement academy, at some stage comes up against robustness issues. Okay? Either the internet, you've got problems with the internet, you've got issues, etc. Okay, so here's what we did. We developed a system for the academy, built on learning objectives from the ground up. Okay, you can see them here. They were pulled in from the state requirements. We linked the learning objectives to the questions. Okay, you can see that here. All the learning objectives are linked to multiple choice questions. So you have different types of questions. You have text-based, etc. But the important thing is you've got to link the learning objectives, because what you don't want is to have a gap, which is not, which you cannot have. You cannot let an officer graduate where they've got a gaps in their recruit experience. That would be a red flag. And again, you've got to track by block. And why do you have to track by block? Because often state mandates are that you've got to have meet certain standards in different things in legal control, etc. They got to meet a certain minimum standard, and you've got to do the same for subjects. Okay, where they've got to meet certain standards in different subjects. And the other thing, is we mentioned this is the fact that you've got to have the ability to give missed question feedback, because that's critical for the instructor. And right now, with a paper test, you find out after you've done the Scantron, what questions were missed. The instructor has immediate feedback and can address whether it's a question issue or was it the fact that we didn't emphasize and didn't train to that particular topic. Okay, after you've done all that, the other thing we found out was even with the best will in the world, there are questions that simply were worded incorrectly, and so they can be removed. Okay, so they're not valid, so you can remove the question and then rescore the test. Okay, with that question. Okay. The other thing is, you wanted to do that through the exam analysis, and then you can then remove the question here. After we've done that, we had the system implemented up and running. We conducted a test ourselves to see was there a difference in learning, in answers, in scores between online testing and paper-based testing. And the issue is because you don't want to bias, or you certainly, is there one doing better than the other? Well, the answer is they basically were the same with no difference. Okay, even marginally better, but really well within standard deviation for both types of tests. Okay, so we did a whole bunch with a cohort of people, and we found that the scores were pretty similar. So the implementation of an online learning system, of an online testing system, did not improve the recruit scores. Did not improve the recruit scores, and this is borne out by lots of research in this. And you can see here again, marginally higher scores. Okay, but we're well within the kind of variance or standard deviation on that particular test. What it does do, and this is important, is it frees up the instructors that they can now begin to offer supplemental tests or pop quizzes, for example. Because one of the things that's well known is if you reinforce the learning throughout the academy, and this was a study done by given the person there by Cox, is if you do a test and do it multiple times and reinforce the learning, you get much higher outcomes. Like you get higher scores. So it does give the instructors the opportunity to produce pop quizzes, for example, where they can drive the scores up in that particular topic. Okay. The only challenge for that was we had to make sure that the instructor had the access to the system. The other thing, it improves operational efficiency. You're not in there printing out tests, collating the results, etc., scanning the results. It just simply saves a lot of hours. Okay. And again, we talked about this. You can give the instructors also access to the system so they can run those pop quizzes. Okay. Got some user feedback. Particularly one here was much easier to match the responses to questions. When you're dealing with Scantron sheets and written questions, it's quite hard. You got to line the two of them up. You don't have that issue. Okay, it was much quicker, able to finish much quicker, which is true. Of course, one person had an issue with their password. It's always one. Said it was fairly straightforward. So, pretty positive outcome. However, one of the issues, and I brought this up, is that the scores must be auditable and traceable. And that's one of the advantages of paper testing, is you basically put the Scantron sheets. So how can we obviate that? How can we get around that issue? Well, one of the things we did was recorded every mouse click, okay? And you can see that here. And this was an issue with one student who said that they did answer it correctly. They were surprised when they got a wrong answer on this question. And they did say that they answered it correctly with answer choice C. But if you can look at the output, you can see that 3 seconds later, they changed their mind and changed it to a D. Okay, so that was good because they recognized, I remember I did change it. Okay, this reinforced that. But we also had issues where students, I still don't believe. So one of the things we had to do, which is kind of unusual, is we had to have the ability to record a screenshot of the student taking the test. Okay, so you could record as they clicked the button, it took a screenshot of that. So you had some photographic evidence. Look at it here where you could record the student, in this case me, taking and answering the quiz. So you can answering the test. So in that case, you've got evidence that the test results were answered accordingly. Okay, I'm just going to wrap it up here. Just bear in mind that Gen Zs are being taught by experienced staff. So, paper-based testing doesn't really work for them. We implemented an online assessment system. It was pretty good. We had some good outcomes, much better improvement in operational efficiency. The admins loved it. Okay, didn't have to do printing out for hours paper testing. It offers the instructors opportunities to improve the learning outcomes, which is really what we want, and also, much better recruit experience. All right, folks, thank you very much. I enjoyed. Any questions? Let me know. Okay, comment.